Hi, I'm Tom Stoneman, and this is The Intelligent Enterprise, where every 2 weeks we take a break from the chaos of enterprise life and get inside a big idea by getting outside of it. Each episode, we meet an industry expert who helps cut through the noise from all the updates and rollouts while exploring one of their favorite break time activities. It might be over a coffee, a workout, or even a game of ping pong. Something that gives them some headspace when they're deep in a problem. Today, I'm joined by Ash Ashutosh, CEO of Pinecone, and a 3-time founder with nearly 30 years of experience building data infrastructure companies. Ash has spent his career thinking about how technology evolves from novelty to ubiquity and finally to invisibility. For most of his life, Ash has been chasing a kind of success most of us probably never think about.
How does it work? Nobody knows. Nobody knows how it works. That's the beauty of engineering. Engineering that truly becomes an embedded part of how we live.
That lens turns out to be exactly right for understanding what Pinecone does and where it's heading next.
I'm sure in the back of your mind, there are so many things you thought about and you were stopped by, well, the technology cannot do it. Well, now it can.
Let's get inside the future of enterprises by stepping outside of them. Every major technology shift needs new infrastructure. The internet needed cloud storage, mobile needed app stores, and AI needs a way to store and search not just data, but meaning. That's the problem Pinecone set out to solve. And for years, it's been the vector database powering some of the most sophisticated AI applications in the world. Now, a new kind of user has arrived, the AI agent. So in my conversation with Ash, my first question was, how does the infrastructure of AI evolve when the user is no longer human?
The conventional stack, we had an application, and there's an operating system, and there's a disk drive. Some place to store blocks of data, some place where applications can get all the services they need, and then there are the applications themselves. In the AI world, you have a similar analogy. The first version, the application was a chatbot, a human being who used a chatbot. And you had LLMs as the new operating system. And now you needed a place where these LLMs got your data. And that was the foundation of where Pinecone was. It was a fundamental store for vectors, which is the core language of how AI works. AI doesn't know how to deal with blocks of data. AI doesn't know how to deal with a database. What it does know is vectors, and Pinecone pioneered the whole idea of building a database for vectors to manage them, to deliver them very efficiently. So for years, ever since OpenAI announced ChatGPT, everybody was fascinated with building chatbots. Humans were the users. And that's a stack that has gone on for several years. Now, somewhere along the way, about, September, October of last year, we noticed we had a new user who started showing up and actually consuming a lot of our APIs. And this user was called an agent. Agentic AI finally hit the shores and hit it big time. And the difference was you had a human being who would speak in a natural human language, chat away on a chatbot, get a beautiful response in a language that a human understood, which could be a text, could be music, could be picture, but you conversed in a way that humans understood. We saw that this new user operates differently. These agents are supposed to get a task done. They don't respond to an answer. They go off and book your ticket in the favorite music festival you want to attend. It goes out and does work for you. It goes out and does a task for you. And now it needs to pretend like it's a human being because that's the language that the underlying infrastructure spoke. And so we spent a couple of months trying to figure out, who this new user is and what's the most efficient way of really serving this. And we announced a product called Pinecone Nexus, which is a knowledge engine, not a vectors database, but a knowledge engine designed expressly for agents and speaks a language only agents can understand, not human beings, because you don't need a human language for a machine to communicate with another machine. So this was part of a big launch that we did among 5 different products we released that align with how the world is moving towards an agentic AI. So here you have a different stack. Remember, the old stack was a human being with a chatbot, with an LLM, and Pinecone vector database. That was a stack for humans as users. The new one is a human being, and the agent is the application, not a chatbot anymore. There is an LLM sitting on the side, but this agent requires knowledge, not vectors, but knowledge.
That's fascinating. You've got a lot of people using your product, and I'm not sure if you're able to talk about, one that you think is particularly interesting that has been using Pinecone or did something spectacular to kind of improve their infrastructure or their database.
Probably the most interesting one that we just did a case study on was a small startup that was trying to provide very innovative recipes. And turns out cooking is not a science, it is an art. It's not precise adding exactly these ingredients in this kind of proportions. There's a little more to it, and that's what makes it special. And that's where semantic context matters, not just, it's not a algorithm. Otherwise, robots would be running a phenomenal kitchen in a restaurant. So this small group of people built around Pinecone and just changed the way they come out with how their audience truly receives a very different kind of an experience about, sometimes you may want a little less spice, and sometimes the same recipe might come out slightly differently depending on, that's how it works. That's how cooking normally works. That's on one side. On the other side, you got some of the largest enterprises. One of the largest drug discovery companies uses Pinecone to help their internal scientists do a lot more research, much more effectively across a broad corpus of knowledge, which is impossible to try to figure out. If you are a scientist and you're trying to work on a specific topic, there's just so much information out there. But I want it relevant, and I want it semantically relevant, not just precisely relevant. I just want to know if I'm looking for this particular component, this particular chemical. Don't just tell me about that one. Tell me about everything like it and things around it, and give me the context that makes me much more productive. So there are drug discovery companies, there are media companies that use Pinecone to better deliver the right kind of content depending on who the user is and what their preferences are. It precisely knows who Tom is. And not only does it know who Tom is, it also knows Tom's profile and understands a little better about people like Tom. How would they respond to various kinds of things? So it's a wide variety of use cases.
I have a question for you about kind of your vision of how the way things are going that direction. I mean, this is the most powerful tool ever known to man, I believe. And the temptation, like I said, is to use it to build things faster, get things done less expensively, or be able to get twice as much done, rather than what could we do better? How can we use creativity, mindfulness, and innovation? And then how can we plug context? How can we plug all of this context from my personal views, everything to the company culture, to our customers? How do we plug all that in and make all that work in a system that's changing by the minute, right? So how do you see this all playing out with AI systems, and how do we stay grounded knowing all this is happening without, I mean, in a lot of cases for me, panic setting in, right?
Experience can either be a liability because you do not want to learn anything new, or can be an asset because you want to leverage it to learn something new. And depending on how they perceive their life, their world, a lot of people are very good at wanting to figure out what else comes next. But even more people are probably worried that you spend a lifetime trying to build an experience. You want to leverage it for your next stage, and you find fundamentally that whole thing has become a liability because you cannot just replay the same playbook you've been doing for a long time. You have to come back and keep your mind open. I believe in the former, which is why I've been a founder in 3 companies, which is why I came to Pinecone to fundamentally go change the opportunity for people to leverage their experience as an asset and allow them to go back and do things that they probably thought was not possible before. And I can give you some examples, right? What AI has allowed us all to do is lower the cost of building new things. So you feel like, wow, here's somebody new who's never done something, and they're generating amazing music. It used to take me so long, and they would just express it, and music comes out. But AI isn't just about building. It's about other things. It's about trust. It's about authenticity. We've all been pretty impressed with big language models. LLMs come out with all kinds of 1 trillion parameters and soon unlimited token context windows. But we also know that a lot of it comes out as garbage. So having a young teenager who's a child prodigy suddenly doesn't make the CEO of a large financial services company obsolete, unless they choose to say, this is what I've been doing for the last 35 years, and that's what I'm going to do for the next 35. In that case, yes, it does make it obsolete. And many of us have gone through 2 or 3 iterations of that throughout our life. We probably haven't gone through the speed at which this is happening now. And sometimes you start to think about whether it's almost exhausting trying to adapt as fast as AI is requiring us to do so. But I love this thing. I love that there is something new to learn. There is an opportunity to solve problems that weren't possible before. So now you get to the point of, can your experience be translated into creativity where you solve problems that you did not think was possible to solve before? Because I'm sure in the back of your mind, there were so many things you thought about and you were stopped by, well, the technology cannot do it. Well, now it can.
So even for someone like Ash, who has been living at the edge of this technology for 30 years, it can be a lot to keep up. Ash told me that when he needs to step back from problems that exist in the abstract, he goes back to something concrete.
Yeah, I think some of the most therapeutic thing that I have is building and fixing things. Anything with my hands, right? Whether it's machines, appliances, construction, projects around the house. If it is broken, I want to take it apart. And if it doesn't exist, I want to build it. I'm an engineer at heart. I think I've been an engineer ever since I've known. And so it just comes naturally to me.
What inspired you to become an engineer? Was there something that you learned when you were younger, or something that happened?
It was a gravitational pull, almost like ever since I can remember. I've been an engineer. I've been fascinated by machines, obsessed, trying to understand how things work, why they break. You realize one of the most important thing about engineering is when you build things that are invisible, right? Nobody thinks about plumbing until it fails. It reminds me of in the Matrix movie where Neo is sitting under the ocean in this, and they're chatting and looking at this thing that's humming out there, and he asks, "What is that?" "Oh, it's our oxygen generator. It just keeps us alive." "How does it work?" Nobody knows. Nobody knows how it works. And that's the beauty of engineering. Engineering that truly becomes an embedded part of how we live, enriches what we do. It just works. And that's basically what's driven pretty much most of my fascination, is to just build things that become an embedding part of our lives. They're completely invisible. They just adapt to how we all live.
It's a philosophy that extends all the way into how Pinecone runs itself, because truly intelligent infrastructure shouldn't make you work harder to understand it. It should just tell you what you need to know. When infrastructure is truly intelligent, it shifts from being a demanding puzzle to a seamless utility.
We internally at Pinecone got rid of all dashboards. I would start a meeting with, okay, let's look at our revenue. Okay, I see something had changed. Now let's look at another dashboard to say, okay, what did change? Oh, these accounts have changed. Okay, why did they change? Oh, that's another dashboard. Okay, what should I do? Oh, that's in my head. There is no dashboard. That's experience. So we were trying to run an n-dimensional business. That decision was left up to the user eventually in the experience, with a 2-dimensional dashboard, which made no sense. So we wrote an ops agent built on top of Pinecone. So internally, if you come to Pinecone today, there's an ops agent that basically says, hey, give me a list of the top 5 customers whose ARR has increased by 16%, and they are in this financial services. And I want to understand exactly what caused it. And more importantly, tell me, what should I do? So not only have we captured the data that is a record of what the business has been doing, but we've also captured how the business is actually doing the work. I just captured all my knowledge into this agent, and from now on, I can answer the precise question. They don't need a dashboard. It tells you exactly, here's why, what happened, here's what you're supposed to do. My suggestion is here are 3 recommendations. Which one do you want to investigate? So you're combining 2 things, right? You're combining the data, that's a system of record, and now you're creating a new thing called a system of knowledge of how the company works, not just the digital footprint of what they've done.
See, that's spine tingling to me, right? It always happens in marketing. You get asked, are you data driven? And I'd say, of course I'm data driven. I have to be, but I'm also insight driven.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what everything you were talking about, I always used to roll into insights,
Yep.
Here's what we think happened and here's why. What you're talking about is even more powerful, and it's right there.
That's an example of where you've just turned this platform called a dashboard that was designed for mass communication, not knowing exactly who the target was, into a hyper-personalized knowledge engine that said, this is what I want to know, just do that. Don't communicate what you want to tell me. Respond to what I want to know, and put an entire knowledge about how this company operates into that recommendation system, into analyzing this thing. And this is why it is amazing to be at Pinecone. We encounter all these amazing people who come up with creativity stuff. As much as I love to be an engineer and say we're creative, we are constrained by our creativity. This thing called physics that constrains us. You don't have that constraint.
Yeah.
You don't have that constraint. You're completely unconstrained in your ability to create things that never existed before.
It's funny. I was listening to a few of your podcasts you've done recently, and you were talking about an agent that you have that basically allows you to turn your press release into a personalized information tool, right?
Yeah.
And that really sparked my imagination, because then I started thinking, well, why couldn't everything could be that way, right?
Yeah.
Almost literally. I mean, so then I started thinking, all these things we've done with marketing all these years, we put it out there, we create links and we get people to go to sites. And I'm a pretty creative guy and I've come up with a lot of cool things and everything. But now it's completely different, because all those things, all those limitations, those walls are down now.
Yeah. This is an example of what we talked about. Things that could not be done before can now be done for the first time. And as a marketing guy, one of the biggest challenges of mass communication is targeting. How do I know who is reading my stuff, who is listening to my stuff, who is paying attention to my billboard? For the first time, you can have a hyper-personalized mass communication. You could not imagine that being possible before. You could not. And that's what the press release agent was about. In fact, you can go to marketplace.pinecone.io, and in there, press release desk is one of those applications. You can literally load up your press release, give it some context around this is what I'm going to do, and you now have your own. And now you change the mass communication where you have a blanket statement for everybody to very, very specific statement for that person in the context of what they care about. So now you apply it to anything that we do as part of mass communication. Same thing with a blog. When you put out a blog, you make some assumptions of who's reading this. Yeah. Embedded in our blog is an agent that says, I know you read all this stuff. What else do you want to know? Or maybe you can tell me something better about what else we should have done. Maybe we missed something. Maybe you wanted more clarification on something, because what a wonderful thing it would be if you say, I am meeting you where you are at, and I'm addressing things that starts with what you know, what you care about, whether it's a blog, whether it's a press release, whether it's any mass communication stuff. So the old model was you do a search and it spews out 100 links and says, good luck, figure out what you want to do. Now I'm very, very specific. I know it is Tom. I know, Tom asked us a very specific topic. I'm going to give you the most relevant part. There is absolutely no excuse not to hyper-personalize. That's an example of what is not possible with AI, that you, with your deep expertise, can now come back and address that.
To wrap up our conversation, I asked Ash a final question that I like to ask all of our guests.
Where's a place that you think AI should not play? Something that it shouldn't really touch?
Relationships. No amount of agents or chatbots across Gemini or Claude or OpenAI can get me that level of creativity that comes out when I'm actually among a bunch of people. And it's not just ideas, it's the energy. And that is super important. And also, when you are with people, when you are in relationships, you get a sense of what they're not saying. You get a sense of implicit and explicit things that you cannot get with an AI and agentic system across the board. And by the way, I've done companies for almost 30 years. And yes, we've done amazing product launches, but those aren't the greatest that you remember. You remember them for a small moment. What you do remember is, people who come back years later and talk about how some conversation we had changed their trajectory. That's hard. That's hard to replace. I would never go back to my chatbot and say, hey, remember that advice you gave me? That was great. Yeah. The more we automate the transactional part of our lives, the more precious the relationship absolutely becomes.
I love that. Well, Ash, thank you so much for being on. We're going to definitely have you back. I think we've got a lot of things to talk about here, and we just appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you, Tom, and look forward to catching up again.
The best infrastructure is the kind nobody thinks about. It just works. And the more of our working lives that get absorbed into that invisible layer, the clearer it becomes what's left. The things that can't be automated. The energy you can only get from being in a room with other people. That's the trade Ash is making, and the one he thinks all of us should be thinking about. Thank you for listening to The Intelligent Enterprise, a podcast where we get inside big ideas by getting outside of them. I've been your host, Tom Stoneman. Please remember to follow the podcast and leave a comment or review wherever you get your shows. See you next time.